Hello, thanks for joining me for 2 Samuel in Summertime. Today is Sunday, June 13th, and this is the 13th chapter of the second book of Samuel. Things turn dark and shady again in this chapter. This chapter recounts the story of the rape of Tamar. And Tamar is the sister of Absalom and Amnon. She is, it doesn't say necessarily that she's David's daughter, but she is definitely the sister of David's sons. David's son Amnon fell in love with his sister Tamar. And it was sort of commonly known that he had these feelings toward her. And that's evident because of what happens a little bit later. But it says here that Amnon had a very crafty and clever friend named Jonadab. And Jonadab hatches a plan for Amnon to lie with the sister he lusted after. He tells him to fake like he's sick and have her come and serve him a special kind of bread. We don't know if it's dumplings or some kind of pudding, but she has to knead it and prepare it for him. And then he sends everyone out of the room, coaxes her closely, and overcomes her and rapes her. Then afterwards, he's disgusted with her and dismisses her, and she protests. And now, to most of our eyes, we would want to be leaving right away, ugh. But she protests because in Deuteronomy, it says that if a woman a virgin is raped, her rapist must agree to marry her. And so that's what we're dealing with here. We don't even know if Tamar is the daughter of the king or not because she's just a girl and it doesn't really matter. What matters is that she shouldn't have been available to her brothers, which she wasn't. But she protests that she's been put out. So now she's a desolate woman. So because this violence has been done to her, she is now unmarriable, she's childless, she has no place in society whatsoever. She's a desolate woman. But Absalom, her brother, loves her, like a brother and sister should, I assume, and cares for her and takes her into his own home. And the story doesn't end there, because about 2 years later, Absalom, he's the most, I guess he's the biggest, most important son of David, and he has a party for the sheep shearing, and he invites the whole court to come to his house, and David protests because he says, that's too much on you. You can't handle all these people. You got the entourage, the Secret Service, the whole thing. we can't have all these people do it. It's a burden to you. And he says, well, how about my brothers? And especially my brother Amnon. And still the king is like, why do you want all these people? And Absalom says, please, please, please. So the king gives his permission for all of his sons to go and be at the party for the sheep shearing with Absalom at Absalom's home. Then Absalom commanded his servants, watch when Amnon's heart is merry with wine. And when I say to you, strike Amnon, then kill him. And don't be afraid because I've told you to do this. And so what happens is exactly that. Gets merry. I'm assuming he gets merry with wine. Absalom's servants did to Absalom what Absalom had commanded. Then the king's sons, the rest of them, got up, got on their cars, and drove away. They got on their mules and they fled. But for some reason, and this is where gossip comes in, the tale got told to King David that all his sons were killed, that Absalom had murdered all his sons. And the king rose up, tore his garment. The king goes into grief. But who walks in? Well, remember clever Jonadab? He's still around. He didn't hang out with Absalom that night. I would imagine why, because he seemed to know exactly what happened. So he tells the king, you know what? I wouldn't be all ready to mourn all of your sons. It seems to me that Absalom would have killed Amnon because of the rape of Tamar. And that makes sense, right? And as he's speaking to the king, this Jonadab, the royal procession of the king's sons approaches, and he sees that all his sons are there except for Amnon. And yes, indeed, Absalom has had Amnon killed, and he is responsible for his brother's death. And then Absalom fled. He took off and was gone for 3 years. And it says here, before we get into the next chapter, that David's heart mourned for his son day after day. Absalom, having fled to Geshur, stayed 3 years, and the heart of the king went out yearning for Absalom, for he was now consoled over the death of Amnon. So the king loves all his sons. His one son did wrong and did evil in the sight of the Lord as well. And so he mourned for him for a period. And when he was done mourning for Amnon, his heart yearned again for Absalom. And after 3 years, it's probably time to have the father-son reunion. But that's chapter 13. I remember this being discussed in an Old Testament class when I was in seminary. And Dr. Carol Newsom's Old Testament class. Very privileged to have been able to learn the Old Testament from such a enormous teacher, not an enormous person, but her teaching is enormous. So the rape of Tamar, because there are other Tamars in Scripture, there's a Tamar that tries to get the birthright of Judah earlier, so I guess this woman may be named after her, but she's the one, if you'll remember from Genesis, if you watched my Genesis series, that she is she marries Judah's oldest son, and then Judah's oldest son dies. And then I think his name was Obed. Maybe that's the second son. There's a second son. She marries him, and then he dies too. And she's without child, and she is the daughter-in-law of Judah, the son of Jacob. And she then tricks her father-in-law into impregnating her by pretending she's a prostitute. If you remember that story, her name was Tamar too. And so this is another Tamar who gets raped, and she is the sister of Amnon and Absalom. Absalom is a protective element in her life. Amnon is lusting after her, and then once he has satiated his lust, he rejects her. So Amnon is not a very good character. He kind of comes out looking pretty besmirched. And he eventually dies for his trouble there. There is a foreshadowing a little bit of the love that David has for his sons, because he would not punish Amnon for the rape of Tamar. And this very much disgruntled Absalom, I am sure. We'll see that later. But he would not enact any kind of revenge on Amnon after he was told that he had defiled his sister this way. So this is kind of probably a sticking point between Absalom than David, and it won't be the last one. But it's important to identify that David loved Amnon, and he was his firstborn. But Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because of the rape of Tamar, which we could all understand. So, family matters, huh? Yeah. Incest and brother against brother and ambivalent father. So Absalom takes matters into his own hands. What is the lesson, though, here from this? This is all bad practice, bad behavior. There's no redemption in this story. Or is there? If this story is an allegory for our relationship to God, then God would be like that foolish king who just loves his sons no matter what. And even after a period of mourning for Amnon, he's longing for Absalom, Amnon's killer. Yeah, it's the kind of love and devotion that we have to understand God treats us with, because we are inheritors of God's love through Jesus Christ. So maybe there's the redemption, and maybe it's somewhere else. If you see it, please email me or call me, and we'll have a talk about it. But for now, today's scripture was the rape of Tamar, the killing of Amnon, and Absalom fleeing until his father yearned for him to return. Have a great day.